Hello and welcome to today's Rocksmith developer stream. I am your host and the community developer on Rocksmith, Douglas Lilly. Very glad to have you here. See some people calling out our nice new graphics. Great work, Aaron. Well done. Yeah, so if you've never been here before, first of all, welcome. Always glad to have anyone hang out, talk about music. Today, we've got a really exciting show. We have Greg Studley back. So a couple months ago, I think we talked about fretboard theory and the major scale, how to think about the major scale in terms of your fretboard, down it, across it, how to turn it into chords. We'll talk about more about that a little bit later. Today, we're talking about modes with Greg Studley with fretboard theory. And if you've never really dived too much into modes, don't be scared. We're going to make it as straightforward and digestible for you as we can, so that should be fun. We also have two performances, a couple metal songs from our friend RubberDave, who you can find at twitch.tv/RubberDave or youtube.com/RubberDave. Also, Greg Barr is back. Greg Barr has a segment for us. He's going to go over Travis picking, and that will be a segment that if you have a guitar handy, grab it. It'll be fun. Also, might be good to have a guitar while we talk to Greg about modes. Might not. He'll tell you. He knows more about what he's going to say than I do. With that all out of the way, just also want to say Baja is here. Baja is our new community manager. She will be handling some giveaways down the way. If you have any questions for Greg or myself, she will take those and hand them to me, and we can talk about your question, get some answers throughout the stream. So just reach out to UB Dork in chat here to get those questions to us. And with that all taken care of, let's please welcome Greg Studley. Greg.
Hello, Doug.
Hello, Greg. Nice to have you here, as always.
Nice to be here.
You have your guitar on hand. Would it be helpful for people to have the guitars with them for this discussion?
People should always have their guitars with them.
Good answer.
At all moments in time. Yes.
Well, there you have it. So if you don't, I don't know how many people usually I think a lot of people do have the guitars on them during the stream, but I don't think everyone does. What do you do? Do most of you have your guitars with you? Do you play along to the songs? Do you work out riffs with us? How do you watch this? I want to know. I've never asked that. Exactly. Greg plays a guitar during the stream, whether or not we want him to. Today we definitely want him to, because we're going to talk about modes. Now I warned people that we were going to talk about modes. Modes can be a scary word for people. Why do you think that is?
Are you asking me, Doug, or are you just asking
Greg.
the
universe?
Greg.
No. Why are modes so terrible? No, why do people find modes scary sometimes?
We fear the unknown. But the beauty is you probably already know them. You just didn't know that you know them. And that's kind of where the whole beauty of the mode comes from, is that so I learned about scales, but then it took me a long time before I actually understood modes. And then I think it took me a little bit longer to realize that they were actually the same thing the entire time. So,
sorry, I'm allergic to modes.
No, it's either modes or me. I don't know which one, Doug, but either way, may you be blessed. So, yeah, I mean, modes can be confusing until they're defined in a way that makes sense to you, because there's a few ways you could absorb the idea of modes. So that's what we wanted to try and do today, is to say, hey, this is one way you can interpret the concept of modes, one way you can see them on your instrument, one way you can use them, but you know, it doesn't have to be this way. There are a few different ways you can absorb this concept.
Okay, and why is it kind of useful to know modes, to know how they work and what you can do with them? How is that useful as a guitarist or bassist?
Sure, it's not like the end all of, hey, once you know modes, you've got it. You know, it doesn't reach that point, but certainly it helps you organize what you want to do, especially during improvisation. So, you know, a lot of times when people improvise, one of the most common starting points is, I'm in the key of C. All the chords that I'm playing are in the key of C, so I'm going to think C the whole time. But the cool thing about modes is, you know, as the chord switches, your scales can switch with it. And so it actually gives you a lot more both option and understanding of what you can do. Specifically, I like to think about it as an improvisation tool, but it works just as well if you're composing and you're like, hey, I came across, this chord in my chord progression. I wonder what the best notes to choose are.
Yeah.
And it can also lay that out for you.
Okay, cool. And one more thing before we get started. Do you consider sort of knowledge of modes a requirement to being a guitarist or a bassist?
No, certainly not. It all depends on what your skill set is and what you want it to be. Again, if you're big into improvisation, you might find that it actually helps a lot. If you're a person who just likes to kind of play what they hear and to play songs, you might find it useful that you can look at your hands and get a better understanding of what you're doing, but it's not something you have to do. No, sure. It's purely the optional path.
Okay, all right. Well, then I'm gonna sort of step back here and let you take things as you tell us about modes. Again, if you're in the chat and you have questions for Greg or myself, please reach out to UB Dork, and we'll get those to you. We'll get those questions sort of at the end of the conversation, unless it's really pertinent.
If it is, you can just interrupt us.
Yeah.
Cool. So I'm gonna share a little slideshow I put together, and I want to just recap where we left off last time, which was covering a major scale for anyone who didn't have a chance to catch that. Just so we have a solid starting point, because really modes can be a branch off of what you're familiar with on the major scale. So here we see a fretboard. The whole idea of a major scale is the distance between the notes. That really defines the scale. So whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step is the formula, if you will, for a major scale, where each whole step listed here means you would move 2 frets to get to the next note, and each half step meaning that you would move just 1 fret to get to the next note. So this right here is like a formula. So a major scale actually has a definition, not just a sound, but a formula that helps create that sound. So if you were to look at this across a fretboard, it would look like this, where anytime we have 2 whole steps next to each other, we leave a fret in between just to say, hey, we're leaving a gap there. And anytime there's a half step, we're purely just going to play the very next note. So this is kind of how it would be laid out across a fretboard, since a fretboard can include every possible note in our 12-tone scale. So since they all use the same pattern, regardless of what key you're in, you could be in the key of C, you could be in the key of F sharp, you could be in the key of B flat, it doesn't matter. They're all going to be the same. And the beauty of that is you can actually start looking at them that way. So if you were to start on the note G, this would be the notes of the G major scale. And it helps to define now why the G major scale needs that note F sharp over there on the 14th fret, because you have that whole step that has to exist after the E. If it was a half step there, you'd have the note F, but because you have a whole step, it requires the F sharp. So this can also start to give some meaning to maybe why certain scales have flats or sharps and why the C scale, for example, does not. It just has all natural notes, because when you line it all up in this pattern, you don't need to use any flats or sharps. If you look at the F scale, it also requires one altered note, which is that B flat. So because they're all the same, you could start on any note and apply this pattern, and it would just work itself out. Okay, so last bit of just the recap of what we had, which is nobody really plays like this. Nobody plays scales like this. It's not really practical for our hands, right? It's not really the way our fingers want to experience the instrument.
But it's a great way to see those intervals.
Unless you play slide. If you play slide, this could totally work for you. I just want to point that out. We want to play in boxes. We like things in compact shapes. Those compact areas allow us to not have to move our hand back and forth, but they allow us to just stay in a spot, move our fingers around, and be very efficient with our playing. And if you took all the notes from G and you moved them into this little boxed area, you would get this. And a lot of you are probably familiar with this being the G major scale. This is like a 1-octave scale shape. You could take it and expand it so that you've got 2 octaves worth. And there is like a very, very concise view of the major scale, kind of what it means, and where we started off in our last one. Are there any questions regarding that stuff, Doug, that we want to address at this point before pushing into the actual modality of the modes?
I think we're good. We have shared links to the last discussion on fretboard theory in the chat, so that if somebody needs to go back and get the full review, that's all handy there for them.
Love it. Okay, so now the topic at hand, modes. Okay, now like I said earlier when I was just chatting with Doug, if you know scales, you already start to know modes, whether you know it or not. So I'm going to show you how this is true, and how this logic can start to kind of show itself within your head. The idea of a mode is exactly what the idea of this major scale is. It's a pattern of distances between notes. This is the exact same pattern that we looked at for the major scale. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Now, we often refer to that as the major scale, but it could also be referred to as a mode, and it would be the Ionian mode. And what it means is just it's that first starting point of the scale in that order. Now, what I mean by starting point is this. If you were to not start at that very first whole step, but if you were to take that whole step and move it so it was the last note, and therefore started a different place, it would look like this. So if you notice, it's the same combination. I just took the first interval and I moved it to the end. And what it does is that now creates a different mode, a different arrangement of notes called the Dorian mode. You could do it again. This would create the Phrygian mode. You could take that half step and move it to the end. This now creates the Lydian mode. You could take it again. Take that whole step, put it at the end. You now have the Mixolydian mode. Do it again. Now you have the Aeolian mode. Now, there's only 7 notes in our scale, 7 intervals to work with. So I can only do this one more time. And now I'm at the 7th mode, known as the Locrian mode. Now, this right here looks like a lot of information, but it's all the same notes the whole time. That's the way that this seemingly complex thing becomes very simple, is look at it like it's notes. So the simplest way to kind of put this into notes is to say, well, we're in the key of C, so it's all C major scale. It's all C, D, E, F, G, A, B. And if you do that, and then you turn them all into notes, they're all just the same notes. It's just a different starting point.
You have this beautiful grid here.
I worked hard on this, Doug.
I believe it.
I mean, yeah, my art skills are not that good, but so this really was an endeavor for me. But the cool thing about this is, this is why I said people can think about modes differently. So the person who is soloing in the key of C with a few different chords and just plays the C major scale isn't wrong. They're not any more or less correct than the person who switches between modes while they're playing the exact same notes. It's all about how you want to view the notes. Do you want to view everything starting at C, or do you want to view some of them starting at C and some of them starting at G and some of them starting at F? Or, those are kind of two mindsets you can take, but either way, it's all the same notes.
Right.
This is why your mindset really can control how you want to ponder this.
So yeah, you're moving where the root is along that series of notes, and that becomes your new root, and just extend out, repeating the same cycle.
You got it. Each time a new root takes over, and therefore a new mode has to be named based upon that root. And that's really the key to this. So again, this can look like a whole bunch of information, but I'm going to show you how practical this is and how much of this you probably already know and just don't even know you're using. So 3 of these use major chords, meaning if you were to take the 1st, 3rd, and 5th note of each one of these patterns of notes, it would create a major chord. So you'd have a C major, an F major, and a G major. And that means that the Ionian mode would be played over a major chord of some kind. The Lydian mode would go over a major chord, and so would the Mixolydian mode. And 3 of them are minor. So right now it's starting to kind of look like there's groupings here. The Dorian mode, the Phrygian mode, and the Aeolian mode all get used for minor chords. And then there's, of course, this guy. Now, when we were going over this, Doug told me how much he liked diminished.
I do like diminished.
So I now have to ask you. I know you're the one asking the questions, Doug, but I got to know, what is it about diminished that you like?
It just sounds spooky.
It is, right? It's got a lot of tension there.
Yeah.
Now the cool thing is you can really experience this by just being like, hey, okay, I'm gonna take a C major scale. We'll probably show this later, but you could just take it and say, well, what if I just don't play the first note and I start at the second note? Guess what? You just played a Dorian scale.
Great.
I mean, that's all it is. Like, you've probably already done it and just didn't even have a name for what you were doing. But this kind of gives you, a concept to run with. So again, this is like, there's a lot of information just on this one page. So I'm going to show you a starting point. If this is like unfamiliar territory, you don't have to tackle 7 modes, because in the music you play, it might not all be relevant, but there are some that are way more relevant than others. So the Ionian mode is probably the most relevant one that we see in music. Okay, it's used in rock music, pop, country, folk. I mean, if there's a style of music that is played on the radio, it's probably using it. So this is a great one to know. Another really common one is the Aeolian mode. And this is the one that we normally just refer to as the minor scale. Mm-hmm. The major scale is Ionian. The minor scale is Aeolian. So this is also used in all these really popular styles of music. So these two you might already be familiar with. If you're looking for the next way to branch out, Mixolydian is probably the way to go if you're into blues and jazz music. If you're into other styles of music, you might find that might not be your best choice. But it all depends on, how you want to attack this, because you don't have to go for all 7 at once. But for those people who like blues music and, maybe branching out into jazz type stuff, Mixolydian is really useful. If you're into metal music, Phrygian is the way to go. Like, without a doubt, that is extremely common mode to be used in metal. So your music may even determine what you want, which one of these you want to attack.
Right. Yeah, because with the Phrygian, you get that minor second, which I think you hear.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's not uncommon to hear in metal songs. And I do want to clarify one thing. I want to ask one thing of you, just to clarify. You mentioned it earlier. In the parentheses, you have the major, minor, and the diminished listings. And just to specify, that is for the chords that those scales create. Those are not major scales, not all major scales or minor scales or diminished scales, except where you've noted here, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, what it means is they get paired with major chords and minor chords, but there's only one major scale, which is the one listed here as Ionian. And there's only one scale that we call the minor scale, and that's referred to as the Aeolian mode.
Great. Thank you, Greg.
Yes. Okay, so the very last bit I have is, how do you apply this to your instrument? Like, this is all great. It's a bunch of letters on a page with arrows and colors. But like, how do you do this? So I picked these 3 because these 3 actually can show you a lot about how this works on a fretboard. And if you understand these 3, you can actually branch yourself to the rest of them. So this is the same scale shape that I used for G major earlier in the recap. Now, if you notice, there's no notes on it anymore. It's just numbers and a letter R. This would be the best way to check out how to do these modes, because if you view it as the notes themselves, then every single key is different. But if you can view a scale as a set of numbers, and you could even substitute the number 1 for root. I like to use an R there because it's the root of the scale. And then each note just has a number after that. Then it doesn't really matter where you are on the fretboard. You could be on the 2nd fret or the 3rd fret or the 15th fret or the 17th. It doesn't really matter anymore because it's just a number sequence.
Sure.
Now, all these number sequences get based off the major scale. So if you were to then look at another popular one that I poked out on the other page, the Aeolian scale or the minor scale, you can actually see now numerically how they're different. So like if you check out the number 5 and the number 6 as compared in these two pictures, you can see that the 6 is right next to the 5 in the minor scale, but it's a whole step away in the major scale. And these are things that are really hard to see without actually kind of picturing them on a fretboard, because you can really see the distance between notes on a fretboard. It also shows you like the 2 and the flat 3 are next to each other in a minor, and that's what actually makes it minor, is that flat 3. So all of these little things that you can see in these images really start to, let you visualize these so that it doesn't matter what key you're in. You can just look at them as sequences. And the last one, the Mixolydian, shows you that it's almost actually the same as the major scale, as the Ionian mode. The only big difference, actually the only difference at all, is that the 7 is now a flat 7. And sometimes that note needs to be put on a different string to accommodate. But the point being that, it's almost the same scale. So it's not like this stuff is all very different from what you might be familiar with. It might just be a slight modification to something you already know and make it very easy to understand.
Right. Okay. So I do have another question here. And again, if anybody in the chat has more questions for us, please reach out to UVDork and we'll get those to Greg. How would you sort of apply these modes over a chord progression?
Oh, that's a great question, Doug. So in fact, I think what I'll do is I think I will go ahead and close this so I can show you directly how you would do that.
All right.
So, okay, so let's take a fairly simple chord progression like, C chord, F chord, and G chord. Okay, they're all within the key of C. You could technically say that you could play the C major scale the whole time then. So for C chord, F chord, and G chord, you could arguably just the whole time. And it's fine. There you go. Okay, yeah, there's all your notes. When you switch to F, guess what? Your notes are fine. When you go to G, your notes are fine. Now, yeah. So for a lot of people, that totally works. But I'm going to show you like how you would apply this and then why there's a bit of an advantage to doing it. So if we were to make it in a way that all of our scale shapes are going to start on the E string, just to make it so they're all very similar shapes then, right? Is to say, okay, this is my Ionian scale. When I go to F, I'd want to use a Lydian scale. So I'll go ahead and take it and move it up here and say, okay, well, there's my note F. And to play a Lydian scale, I would go 1, 2, 3, sharp 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I could take that up a second octave too. And then for G, I'd want to use a Mixolydian scale. So that's one we saw before, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, flat 7, and then you're back to your root or your 1. And you can, again, take that one up another octave as well.
Okay.
So you could take a chord progression and say, I'm just going to sit here and C, or I'm going to move into these. Now, it's all the same notes. Remember that. I'm not actually playing different notes than when I'm playing in C. So but this is where you get to make a choice and go, well, what's the advantage of doing that?
What is the advantage?
Great question. So check this out. If I'm in C, right, and I'm like, okay, C major scale, I think of this as C major, and I come across an F chord. Okay. Where are my important notes? Where's my F? Where's my A? Where's my C? Why are those notes important? Well, it's the root, the third, and the fifth. It's the notes of the chord. But if I'm thinking C while I'm playing F, I have to make this like weird transfer in my brain to go, well, I'm playing a C scale, but wait a minute, hold on. Now I'm actually on an F chord. So I got to think about which are the important notes of that chord while I'm doing this. And all of a sudden you're kind of like separate. You're thinking two different things at the same time. You're thinking C scale, F chord. But the cool thing is those two things can coordinate if you go C scale, C chord, F scale, F chord, G scale, G chord. And now you're actually thinking the chord and the scale as being synonymous, so that your important notes, for example, are very obvious to you. So if you know an arpeggio and you're playing here in F, then okay, well, they're your notes. And you know that this is your third and your second and your sixth and your major seven and your third and your fourth or your sharp fourth and your fifth. But if I do this over here while I'm thinking C, it's very, very confusing, because you're having to make a shift in your brain from one of these to another. Now, it doesn't mean you can't play an F Lydian scale here. In fact, you can, because guess what? It's the same notes as C. It's all about how you think about it. And that's why I'm saying a lot of people think about these in different ways. My method personally is to say, I'm on an F chord. I want to think like I'm in F. I want to think about F. I don't want to think about C.
You would be distracted by C.
Yeah, I don't even care if it's the same notes that I was literally just playing on C. I don't want to think about C anymore. I want to think about it like I'm on F, because this keyboard player over here and this bass player over here are both shooting an F. So I need to match that. I can't go, I don't want to be thinking something totally different than what I'm hearing.
Right. Yeah, that's confusing. That would be confusing.
Not for some people, that totally works. That's the funny thing, is that this is why I'm saying this isn't like a catch-all, like this is the way you do it. It's more like this is one way that people do it, and I've heard of a ton of different ways that people do this.
Yeah. But
it's all the same thing. You're still using the Lydian mode, whether you know it or not.
Right. And I do have a question I think is relevant to what you were talking about with those important notes. Chris Old asks, so the flat third means minor, flat seventh means diminished?
Good question.
And I don't think that's quite right, but
please. So flat third with a root and a fifth defines a minor chord. You got to really say it's that combination of those three notes together: a root, a flat third, and a fifth. Now, a flat seventh can have a couple different functions, all depending on how the third is. So just to give an example here, and this is kind of where chords and modes can be kind of visualized together, is if you have a root, a third, a fifth, and a seventh, that would be a major seventh chord. That's just a regular seven, not a flat seven. Now, we were asking about a flat seven.
Yeah.
So if you have a root, third, fifth, flat seven, that gives you what's called a dominant seventh chord. Not a diminished seven, but a dominant seventh chord.
Okay.
Now, this same note, though, this flat seven could potentially exist in other chords. You could do root, flat third, fifth, flat seven. And now this chord, because it has a flat third and a flat seven, now this chord ends up becoming a minor seventh chord. But wait, there's more.
Sure. Yeah, please.
Because you could do a root, a flat third, a flat fifth. Now Doug's getting happy, by the way.
Yeah.
And a flat seven. And now you've got a minor seven flat five chord, also called a half diminished chord. But if you notice, the logic in all of this is numerical. I never said what note I was playing the whole time.
Right.
That's the key of all of this, is every number sequence equals a chord. And as long as you can comprehend that root third fifth is some kind of major, root flat third fifth is some kind of minor, then that's kind of like your starting place with every chord you build. So you can go, okay, does it have root third fifth? It does. So it's some kind of major chord. There's no way I'm going to call this thing minor.
Right.
So that's, if you're ever trying to kind of understand how the extensions, meaning the higher tones, fit over a chord and how you name it, that's always your fundamental starting place.
And I have another question from Charles Monroe. Charles Monroe says, cool, what about the bass? How do you use this information?
Oh, you don't use this on the bass. No. So another really good question. And actually, some styles of music, you don't really use it. So let's just like put that in context. It's like, well, like what? Okay, so let's think about, mind you, I'm still going to play this on a guitar unless Doug wants to come in on his bass. But think about like a country bass line, okay? Mm-hmm. So this kind of thing. It's just roots and fifths.
Yeah.
There's not even a third. So like, you're not even as a bass player defining if the chord is major or minor. You're just being like, here's a root, here's a fifth. Doesn't really matter. Now, mind you, that's kind of a boring line. I wouldn't really advise that should be your, go-to country line.
It's a starting point.
Thank you, Doug. Yes, it's a starting point. But now let's branch into like another style. Okay, let's say like you're playing like a punk bass line. Guess what? It's all roots. It doesn't matter. So that's what I'm saying. It doesn't always matter, but now let's see where it does matter. So let's talk about a blues bass line, like a walking blues bass line. So walking bass lines in general tend to follow the quarter note beat. Sometimes they add some extra notes in, especially when they're getting interesting, right? But what they do is they really follow the chord tones and the mode. So everything in blues is, well, I won't say everything. So we'll say 90% of blues is seventh chords, meaning dominant sevens, B flat 7, C7, G7, those kind of chords. And so it's all Mixolydian mode, because that's the only time that you find a dominant seventh chord is when using that specific mode. It's the only one that creates a dominant seventh chord, which we don't ever write as dominant 7 when we're writing a chord. We just write it as 7. So in that one, a bass line might go. Now, what I was doing was root, third, fifth, flat 7, root, third, fifth, flat 7, root, third, fifth, 6, flat 7, 6, 5, 3, root. So almost everything was based upon the chord, but I also used this 6. And the only way I could know to use this 6 is by knowing that, hey, that's not part of the chord, but it's part of the mode. And so, and when you get into jazz, this whole idea of following chord tones to create bass lines just explodes, and without it you're kind of lost. But so again, it all depends on the genre of music that you're playing. So for bass, if you want to start exploring it, I'd actually suggest blues more than any other kind. You could do minor blues and blues songs, and it'll really start to help you kind of see, oh, why are the bass players choosing these notes? And modes is almost always the reason. Modes and chord tones.
All right, cool. Well, thank you very much, Greg. Were there any closing thoughts with modality, with modes that you wanted to?
Doug, I could, you know me, I could go on and on with this stuff, man.
But are you?
No. But I don't have to. No. But hey, any questions? Throw them in the chat. Have discussions amongst yourselves about this. Talk to other people about this, because again, you might understand this one way and somebody else might understand it a different way, and you both might be right.
Right.
So it's a really good thing to discuss with people, to be like, did you understand that the same way I did? Are you thinking about this the way I do? Because they might have a different way, which might be better. You never know.
Right. And you can, even if you're doing everything right, you can still learn sort of how to process, how to think a bit differently, a way that maybe is easier for you to slide into the improvisation that you're trying to the riff factory that you're trying to make. It might help that be a bit more efficient. And as always, and while you're talking about it, while you're asking us questions, a lot of your questions are how we get the ideas for what we want to talk about on the chat. So if there are other fretboard theory questions that you have, just larger things that you would like to hear us talk about in the future, let us know. Tell us in the chat, and we'll let you be dork. That's once more Baja. We'll let her get those to us, and maybe in a future stream we can talk about whatever your question is. Right now, I want to say thank you very much to Greg Studley for being here, for putting this discussion together. Always a pleasure. Hey, this is 2 in a sequence now. This is officially a recurring segment. Yeah. So we will see you very soon. Again, always a pleasure to have you on the stream. Thank you, Greg Studley.
Always a pleasure to join you, Doug. Thank you.
And right now, I'm very happy that speaking of returning visitors, we have RubberDave back on the stream to do a couple of metal songs. And he also this is a stream full of education. For RubberDave's second song, he's going to give you some advice. So I mentioned earlier, if you have a guitar on you, that'll be useful over the course of the stream. For RubberDave's second song, if you happen to have something with really high gain, that might be useful. But we'll talk about that then. Right now, let's say hi to RubberDave. After that, another Greg Barr, back on the stream after years of being away, and then we're gonna have a giveaway after that. So we'll see you then.
Hi, I'm Dave. I'm known on Twitch and YouTube as RubberDave, and the first song I'm going to be playing tonight is Tornado of Souls by Megadeth. Now this is one that's I consider it to be one of those milestone songs. Most people, when they're starting out, will learn to play songs like Smoke on the Water, Enter Sandman, Smells Like Teen Spirit, other songs like that, and then depending on sort of what way you go, there's different songs that you will work towards. For me, having taken on lead playing in the last few years, Tornado of Souls, specifically the solo in Tornado of Souls, is one of those milestones, and so here it is.
What guys, my name is Greg Barr. I've been a developer on Rocksmith for, believe it or not, almost a decade now. I came in before Rocksmith 2014 on the original Rocksmith doing the bass expansion pack, and then quickly moved my way into transcribing guitar and note tracking, level designing, all that kind of thing. I used to be on the stream back when Dan Amrick was hosting it in the early days, but it's been a while. I am glad to be back with you guys and hoping to teach you some things about Travis picking. In the last year or two, I've gotten more into Chet Atkins and kind of learning how to accompany myself without a band, because during these times it's pretty hard to find someone else to play with. So I got into Travis picking, which is of course from the late great Merle Travis, who kind of pioneered that technique of finger picking. So it's kind of rooted in ragtime, and it's kind of this alternating bass with kind of chords and melody in between it. So you can kind of be a one-man band in this sort of ragtimey tradition. But players like Tommy Emmanuel have taken it to even further heights. And today I'm going to show you just like kind of an exercise that can help further your Travis picking. Even if you already know how to Travis pick, I find some of these patterns are pretty challenging to pull off. So whether you know how to Travis pick or not, I think this will help you a lot. So we're going to mostly focus on the right hand while holding a simple A minor chord. Okay, so we're going to be holding that same A minor chord, and we're going to start with the bass line. So with Travis picking, your thumb is always alternating between the root and the fifth, and in this case we're going to add a lower fifth as well, which is this open E string, so open red string. So you're going to have this as your bass line, and I like to mute with the knife edge of my hand right here, just on the back, on the saddle or bridge, just lightly, so it doesn't ring out too much. So that pattern is, and then back to the D string. Okay, so once you got that down, you can add the other elements of it. And in this case, sometimes it's a chord, but in this case, we're going to do kind of a roll, almost like a ragtime style roll with your fingers. So we're going to ascend. So we're going to use index, middle, and ring finger to play the G, B, and E strings. And this is all still holding that A minor chord. So we're going to go. Okay, so that's that pattern, just going up. And now we're going to add that to the original bass line. So it's a bit like rubbing your belly and patting your head at the same time. But if you take it slowly, one at a time, you can get it. So remember, the bass line is this. And then we add. So I'm going to do that really slow again. So take your time with that. It's difficult at first, but once you get it, it actually becomes harder to play it slower than to just breeze through it. So then once you get that down, next step is to reverse those fingers. So instead of ascending, you're going to be descending. Right? So let's try that. now once you got those two shapes down, you can throw it off and start on a different string. So on that first one, instead of, you can start on the middle finger, do the same thing. Yeah. So it kind of comes around eventually. And once you get those two things down, so the ascending, the descending, play around with starting on different fingers on each pattern, then if you want to go further than that, you can extend that pattern, that polyrhythm, out even more, and it would sound like this. So instead of starting over after 4 patterns like this, starting over, right? Starting over, and you're always starting over, always on this one. You know, for the ascending pattern, you're always starting with this. Instead of that, you can extend that pattern out. So it sounds something like this. Let me try that again. Likewise, you can do the same thing with the descending. So hopefully that gives you something to chew on with those right hand finger style patterns. Then once you get that down, you know, try it with other chords and see what you can come up with. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks for joining me. Hope you learned something, and I hope to see you again soon.
And welcome back to a live portion of this week's Rocksmith Developer Stream. I remain your host and community developer, Doug Lilly. Glad to have you back. So yeah, I saw some people saying, I can't do that. Give it a try. Give it a try. Take it slowly. Maybe just introduce 1 or 2 of the sort of treble strings at a time while you work on that bass line until your thumb just sort of goes on its own and you don't really have to think about it. And then just introduce more of those strings and rewatch it. Watch Greg practice, play along. You'll get there. Right now, we're going to give away a few copies of a song pack on Steam. These are going to be first come, first serve. Baja, our community manager, is going to put them in the chat. So look for UB Dork to unleash 5 copies of the Blues 3 song pack on Steam. That song pack includes Freddie King's Going Down, John Lee Hooker's San Francisco, and Shuggy Otis's Booty Cooler. All of those can be yours. If you're lucky, again, these are first come, first serve. So if you grab the code and you redeem it on Steam and no one else did it, it's yours. Congratulations. And other than that, we are going to take one more look at RubberDave, who, again, check him out. He's on Twitch, twitch.tv/RubberDave, youtube.com/RubberDave. Find him on either of those channels. And really excellent player, and does some good community stuff too. So check those out. So yeah, here once more is RubberDave.
The second song I'm going to play for you tonight is Cemetery Gates by Pantera. This is just a song that I've always just loved. It's full of pinch harmonics all the way through the choruses. At the end, some amazing squeals. It's just an awesome song to listen to. Yeah, here we go.
Wonderful performance.
Okay, so I'm going to try and show you how to do those squeals at the end of cemetery gates. So what you're going to want is you're going to want a guitar that has a floating tremolo bridge. So on this I've got a Floyd Rose bridge. Now you're also going to want to be able to know how to play just natural harmonics. We're not using pinched harmonics, we're just using natural harmonics. So if I go to a tone that's got a bit of gain and some delay, there you go. There's a straight up natural harmonic, and what that is, it's you play the open note and then just touch the string in a particular place. If you don't know the particular places, the most common ones are on like just above the 5th fret, the 7th and the 9th. But we're going to go down the other end and we're going to go the other way. We're going to find some harmonics that are a little bit harder to find. The first one there is on the 4th. Okay, so just hold your finger above the string, above the 4th fret. Hold your finger on the string just above the 4th fret, and you should get that harmonic there. And that's the first one we're going for. As I say, the further we go that way, the smaller the margin for error. So like there for the 5th fret, you got quite a large area that you can hit, and you'll still get that harmonic. The further down you go, that target area gets smaller and smaller. But what we're going to do is we're going to do it's basically the opposite to a dive bomb. So a dive bomb, you play the harmonic and then push the whammy bar in. What we're going to do is we're going to do a squeal, which is exactly the opposite. We're going to get the harmonic and then we're going to release the whammy bar. The problem being, when you're pushing the whammy bar in, your right hand is already busy. So it's a bit difficult to push it in and accurately pluck the string and bring it back up. Can be done, but it is actually easier once you're pushing that in with the right hand. Use your index finger there to pluck the string. So what you can see, what I'm doing there with my left hand is play that string, and then with my thumb and my index finger I'm now muting all the other strings. Now if I was to do that and touch the string in the harmonic position at the same time, that's what we get. So what I've done there is I've plucked the string with my index finger, I've hit the harmonic point with my middle finger there, and then I'm muting all the other strings with my thumb and my index finger. And we can go further, pull this right back. So that's basically what I'm doing there. It's pushing down on the whammy bar with my right hand, plucking with the left hand, then touching with my middle finger, and then muting the other strings. And we're going to do that. There's a harmonic at the 4th fret, then there's one at the 3rd, then there's one at about 2.5-ish, and then one at just about sort of like it's somewhere about 1.9. So what we're going to do, there's your first one, there's your second, there's your third, and there's your last one. And that last one always tails off for me. Unfortunately, I don't have the same setup Dimebag had, and I don't have the benefit of getting a load of feedback to keep that string ringing out. But that's how you play those final squeals. There's your 4th fret, 3rd fret, 2.5, and about 1.9. And that's it.
Truly a thing of beauty. We are back live. I am, for the last time today, Douglas Lilly, your community developer and host for today's Rocksmith stream. Thank you so much to RubberDave for both not only playing some bangers, playing some songs, some metal here, but showing us some techniques on the side. Thank you so much for that. And in a way that again, understandable. I think easy to read, easy to follow along. Give it a shot. Hopefully you all had your guitars with you, or you're going to go now and just crank the gain and see what you can do with those. And if you don't have locking pegs, go easy maybe this time around. But I also want to thank Greg Barr for returning and talking about Travis picking with us. Greg Studley for working out that great description, great tutorial on what modes are, how to incorporate modes into your playing. Thank you all for being here today. Thank Dan Emmerich, the voice in my head, for running the board. And thank you, Baja, for giving away some codes, getting questions to me. And today is my mom's birthday, so if you're watching, happy birthday, Mom. Otherwise, we will see you back in 2 weeks. If you have more fretboard theory suggestions, ideas, things you want to know, things you kind of understand, but maybe would like a different explanation of, let us know. We can talk about what you want to talk about. Other than that, if this was your first if this was your first Rocksmith developer stream, it's not always theory. It's not always fretboard theory. A lot of times we talk about music history, music appreciation, and just music in general. We just like talking about music here. Thank you for being here. We are on Twitter and Instagram at Rocksmith Game. We stream here every 2 weeks currently on YouTube. So if you give us a subscribe, or if you follow us on Twitter, you'll be alerted whenever we go live. If you want to know. Thank you for being here, and we will see you in a couple weeks. Goodbye.